seen time and time again in photos that we have, and we'll show them in a minute, of their participation. Are they showing them now? There he is. And so you'll see that, right? Is that these folks, Catholic Church helped along the way, had priests, helped spiritually, helped morally in their march. So as they came through San Antonio, they went to the Alamo and had a huge rally there. Also, 1,000 people were at the rally. After that, they went on to Austin. But in New Braunfels, and you'll see one of the photos here. In New Braunfels, this is I think also it would help the cause tremendously, because at that time, Governor John Connally was governor of the state of Texas, and Ben Barnes was Speaker of the House, and Wagner Carr was Lieutenant Governor. And so they were we understand they were on the road to go dove hunting. And so what I hear, because there's still people alive who were there, that tell is that the marchers were on a roadside rest area, a little north of New Braunfels, when I guess they drove Lincoln Continental, those big black things. So they stopped, the Governor Barnes and Wagner Carr stopped there, and Governor Connally came out and spoke. And so he told the workers this, he told the people who were marching this. He says, don't go any farther. Don't go any farther. You don't need to go to Austin because I'm not going to be there. He says, and besides that, I'm not going to call any kind of special session to try to get legislation passed to raise the minimum wage. And so the workers got really incensed about that. And they said, well, you may not be there, but we're going to continue our march. And they did in fact continue the march. And so when they got to San Marcos, then they had a huge crowd, because then the Mexicanos really across the state got really, really angry at what Governor Connally, how he had dismissed them, how he had said, you all are nothing, because I'm not going to be there. And so in San Marcos, the crowd started to get bigger and bigger. And finally, on Labor Day in 1966, that was September the 5th, when the farm workers arrived, there was 10,000 people at St. Edward's, where they started the march, and they proceeded on down to the Capitol. And their demand, of course, at that point was that Texas pass a minimum wage bill of $1.25. Texas at that time did not have a minimum wage law at all in the books, even though there was a minimum wage law in most of the other states in the country. But Texas did not have one. And so the issue here was establishing the law, and it took a period of to 69 to get the law passed, and then in 1970 it was in fact enacted. And so it took all that time, even though we had made this huge effort, huge sacrifice by hundreds of people. This Texas legislature still did not credit. And when we talk about passing legislation, that's how it is. It's not an easy thing. Even though everything you are saying is right, everything you are doing is right, it is still not easy to pass any kind of legislation in the state of Texas. And take my word for it, because I worked on passing legislation for farm workers for many, many years. And it was never easy. We had to do a lot of work. We had to have a lot of people lobbying, and still we passed it just by a few votes. The legislature is not on your side, and you have to do a lot of work to get anywhere with anything that you want to do, especially if you're people of minority descendants. So at any rate, one of the things that there was huge changes that occurred because of that historical strike in March. There was huge things. One is that the union established its residency in Texas, and it still exists today. So we've been in South Texas for 50 years, representing farm workers in many, many issues, not only in legislative issues, but organizing strikes in the fields, but also helping them on their personal problems that they have, because they are poor, they don't have any power, and they really have to take care of some of the personal issues. In 1979, we started having political conventions in South Texas, where we had farm workers come in and voice their opinions on legislative issues. And for a period of 10 years, under the Governor Mark White, we were able to pass protective legislation for farm workers. And those were workers' compensation. And let me just back up a little bit. Every piece of worker protection legislation that has been passed for every other worker in this country and in this state always excluded farm workers from its protection. It always said workers' compensation for everybody except farm workers. Now, isn't that interesting? And so we had to do like three hits before we could get anything done. One is that we had to file a lawsuit because of that exclusion, and that lawsuit would go from district court all the way up to the Texas Supreme Court. We had to get a decision from the Texas Supreme Court that said, yes, the exclusion is discriminatory under the Equal Protection Law in the state of Texas. And then they would bounce it over to the legislature and said, you take care of this issue because you've got to pass a law that's going to protect them. And then we had to go lobby the legislators. And in every instance, because I was there in every instance, we just got about 5 votes more than we needed. So it was like, 80 votes to whatever the other was. So I'm telling you, even though everything was right on our side, the legislators still could not vote for it. Governor Clements, a Republican, we had a bill that would outlaw the use of the knife because growers were asking workers to bend over and use a knife instead of a hoe to thin and weed. Do you know how crippling that is? And so we got the law. We passed it through the House and the Senate, and Governor Clements vetoed it. Now, isn't that something? Isn't that something? And it just went on and on and on. And I'll tell you this, it goes on today. So anyway, let me get back to this story. I just get so pissed off at how we continue to be treated. Anyway, I do want to say a couple of things about those strikers and those people who took this leap of faith in their lives. They were arrested many, many times. And I will say this, is that even though the leaders, and you'll see in the photos in a little bit, even though the leaders you can see were all men, Nadia Vera was a female and she was secretary treasurer. But of all those folks who were, and remember women, this was in the 60s, when we were told to, shut up, wear dresses, all that kind of stuff, right? You can't wear pants, you have to be quiet, and all that kind of business. One third of those who were arrested were female. Now, isn't that something? You know how we would be told, no, cállate, no hagas nada, no hagas ruido, siéntate en la casa. Well, these women, even in all of that period, said, you know what, we're going to get arrested. And in fact, they were. So women were critical to what was going on, critical to what the successes were that we had. So I don't know how much time I have left, but I did want to talk about a little bit about the photos so that you can, so that I can kind of like tell you who they are. Can you go ahead? See, this is a woman. She's holding the strike sign here at Trophy Farms. Trophy was owned by Othel Brand. His son just ran for mayor in McAllen, epitome of his father, and just as mean, and he lost, thanks be to God. Go ahead. This is a fantastic photo that we took of Connolly and Ben Barnes when they met with the farm workers in New Braunfels in August of 1966. Look at that nose, look at that haughty nose looking down on us. Go ahead. And this again is La Casita Farms, which is where the strike started, and it focused on La Casita, but it did take, in fact, it did include all the growers there in Starr County. Go ahead. This is Magdaleno Dimas on the right, and Ismael Diaz. Ismael Diaz is alive still, and Magdaleno Dimas was brutally hit and brutalized by Texas Ranger A.Y. Ali. And his case was part of the Supreme Court case that went up against the Texas Rangers. His name is important in all of these discussions. Go ahead. This was a march when people were marching into Austin. And these were the leaders. Domingo Arredondo was president, he's the one in the center. They also sang, Erasmo Andrade is a good friend, an ally, and Max Perez. This is also a huelguista woman holding a sign in front of a produce shed. That takes courage. It takes a lot of courage to stand out there. We had a lot of union support. These were the ones at Pioneer here in San Antonio. The workers at Pioneer came out to support as we walked in through Probac and rounded the corner there at the Pioneer Mill. The Ernie Cortez, if you know Ernie Cortez and his history here in San Antonio, he was there. And a lot of the leaders that came out of the farm worker movement, and farm worker strike in '66, became leaders in different areas. Ernie Cortez was one of them. And Domingo Arredondo, of course, president of the union, and Max Perez. And here there was a lot of support from around the state of food that was being sent down there to the farm workers so they could sustain themselves while they were on strike. Had a lot of support. And children were on strike too. This was Mr. Benavides. He was fiel in front of La Casita Farms. This is Father Cheryl Smith, and he was assigned and did a lot of work down there. A lot of priests were down there that helped, and a lot of other kinds of, and other faiths were also down there. Ed Kruger was one. Here again, Domingo Arredondo and Max Perez. Another children. They would go to all the rallies. All the children were always at the rallies. Another rally. And this was in front of the Hidalgo County Courthouse. By the way, we had just put a marker at the Hidalgo County Courthouse. You know that now our judge down there is Ramon Garcia, and he has been an ally in making sure that we would have a marker there right in front of the doors that lead into the county courthouse. And we just had a ceremony about a month or so ago where we placed the marker and we kind of dedicated it. It's a really nice marker if you're down there. These are the heroes. This was put on a billboard, on a sign there of the heroes of La Huelga. And there you have. If you look at the names of those of you who are historians, you look at